Thank y'all for joining. We will be getting started really soon. So excited for this amazing panel discussion with some amazing Black feminists. Let's see. Got folks from Seattle. Oh, hi, Carol Ann from Canada. Harper, so nice to meet you, or so nice that you're here. Oh, we have folks from New Zealand. Wow. I see Houston. Okay, H-Town. And someone from Philly. Yes, definitely. Thank y'all so much for being here. Can get started soon. Okay, I see Chi-Town. UK in the building. Okay, we got a lot of folks. We will be getting started soon because we have a lot to talk about. Black and Alive in Durham, North Carolina, and Free Palestine, period. Yes. Hello from St. Croix. Wow. Well, we are going to get started because we have a lot to talk about. So, welcome everyone to part 1 of Is There Really a Black Feminist Movement? Thank you so much for being here. My name is Jaimee Swift, and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the founder and executive director of Black Women Radicals. We are a Black feminist advocacy organization dedicated to uplifting Black feminist activism around the world. Is There Really a Black Feminist Movement is a 4-part online series that serves as a political provocation to discuss the convergences and divergences of Black feminist movements and politics. This series comes from a question: is there really a Black feminist movement? I posed during BWR's Black Women Radicals Black Feminism Lives Summit in August of last year. The question was met with much conversation from panelists and audience members alike, with some believing that there is a movement and others vehemently expressing that there is not one. Rooted in Bell Hook's critique of Black feminist essentialism in the chapter Revolutionary Black Women, Making Ourselves Subject, and Audre Lorde's essay, Eye to Eye, Black Women, Hatred and Anger, the mission of the series is to learn and embrace Black feminist difference, analyze the power of Black feminist organizing both past and present, and to discuss the ruptures, silences, betrayals, hurt, and even harm that are perpetuated in our work to ensure the strength, sustainability, and possibilities of our Black feminist movement building. Although I asked this question, is there really a Black feminist movement during the summit? I've pondered this question for years, especially after I co-organized the second Defend Black Women March in 2022. The march, which focused on celebrating Black feminisms in Latin America and the Caribbean and honoring Black, Brazilian, bisexual, feminist, activist, and councilwoman Marielle Franco, who was assassinated in March 2018, we were met with resistance from other Black feminist organizers who tried to not only sabotage the event, but question what Franco's assassination had to do with Black feminists in the United States. This, amongst other actions I've encountered in movement space, led to my personal and political inquiry about whether we truly have a Black feminist movement. And with this, I will introduce our amazing panelists, right? We about to get into it. Okay. First, we have Andrea Aristea, who uses she, her, Ella pronouns, Andy for short, is a Black Latina, of Cuban and Dominican descent, respectively. Born and raised in Miami-Dade County, she's been working within the nonprofit industrial complex since 2015 and currently works for a grassroots organization. She has extensive knowledge of the child welfare system in Florida and has direct experience working with vulnerable, unaccompanied youth experiencing housing instability in Miami-Dade County. Andrea is also the host of Thoughts from the 305, a podcast discussing current events living in Miami, and anything that she pleases to discuss. She also strives to translate language gatekept by the system of higher education to make it more accessible to the population at large. So Andrea, thank you so much for being here. Woot woot, Miami. Okay. Next up, we have Adjoa Owusu-Barnea, who uses she, they pronouns, who is a writer, poet, book club facilitator, publishing person, and an occasional book and film reviewer with a background in social care coordination. Adjoa wants to pursue a master's in Black studies and has a keen interest in literature written by Black authors. So thank you so much, Adjoa, for being here. Next, we have Amina Dio. Amina Dio, born in North Carolina, became deaf at age 6. Raised in Rochester, New York, she now resides in Maryland. A deaf performer, artist, and mother, Amina serves as a line producer for Teddy Boy Films and Entertainment, a deaf Black-owned production company creating authentic, inclusive content spanning films, series, documentaries, and screenplays. She advocates for radical self-expression, inclusivity, and healing through movement. Amina, thank you so much for being here. We have, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Bree Rivera. Bree Rivera, she, they, is a Black trans femme dedicated to resourcing Black trans joy and liberation. She is the founder of the Black Trans Fund, who is doing incredible work to center Black joy and liberation and supporting Black trans communities. So thank you so much, Bree, for being here. It's an honor. Last, but certainly not least, we have Brendan A. Tynes. Brendan A. Tynes, she, her pronouns, is a queer Black feminist scholar and storyteller from Columbia, South Carolina. Okay, Columbia, South Carolina. She received her Bachelor of Arts with distinction in cultural anthropology and a minor in education from Duke University. She earned her PhD in anthropology from Columbia University in 2023. Her research interests include Black feminist anthropology, Black feminist critical theory, gendered violence, Black political movements, memory, abolition, and affect studies. Brendan was a co-host of the award-winning Zora's Daughters podcast, a Black feminist anthropological take on popular culture and issues that concern Black women, girls, and queer and trans people. So Brendan, thank you so much for being here. All right, y'all, we are about to get into it. So the first question focuses on who are your sources or the catalyst to your Black feminist politics and praxis. So I'm interested in who shaped your Black feminist practice and how have your experiences, your identities, and your upbringing cultivated or catalyzed you to Black feminist organizing?
I can go ahead and start. So huge shout out to Lutsi Segu, who's the person who introduced me to Black feminism. On the interweb, she's known as the social justice doula, and yeah, she basically set the foundation for my work or like my studies in Black feminism. And as you mentioned earlier, I'm a dark skinned Black Latina from Miami-Dade County, so everything that I could totally see the we'll say the separation or the perceived separation between Black feminists in Latin America and the Caribbean and the US, because there's still so much language, especially that hasn't been shared, even though folks are saying the same thing, just in different languages.
Yes, thank you for sharing, Andrea. Anyone else who has shaped your Black feminist practice and why are you doing this work of Black feminist organizing? Don't be scared, y'all. We in here. We in here.
I will go next. The catalyst maybe sounds quite individualistic and quite selfish in that I think the catalyst for me getting into Black feminist politics was pain. I kind of with what Audre Lorde says about, she came to theory because she was hurting. I think that's very much so where my starting point had been. I'm trying to give the summarized version of events, but I think essentially when you grow up feeling like the system isn't made with your survival in mind, you're constantly clinging to things, trying to look for, a space where you can feel nurtured, a space that does feel like, your survival and your thriving is a priority. And for me, that is Black feminism. But quite strangely, my first introduction was Ntozake Shange's choreo poem for Black women who have considered suicide, When the Rainbow is Enough, because it was the first example I had of, we feel these things and it's not taboo. We don't have to keep them in this private space. There isn't this, like in the choreo poem, there is no attempt to be quote unquote perfect. There's no attempt to be this idea of Black excellence, the perfect Black child. It is, all of the yearning, all of the lovelessness, all of the longing, all of the joy, all of the desire, everything is encapsulated in there. And so it started from there and then went on and on and on. And a friend of mine, Rihanna Jade Parker, introduced me to this bridge called My Back. And that text changed my life. It really did. And then a couple of years ago, I learned that my great-grandmother fought in Yaa Asantewaa's War, which was the War of the Golden Stool in Ghana. And it just kind of, all of those things and lots of other people I haven't mentioned just continue to affirm, yes, this is the path, this is the praxis I want to lead my life by. And so it then also makes me think, what am I doing outside of reading and engaging in these theories in isolation? What am I doing to help? I feel like I am being cultivated and I'm being catalyzed into Black feminist organizing and movement building. I don't think I've reached that point yet, but the start is where we start. And that's kind of where I've come from.
Thank you so much.
This is Amina. So my first exposure was to Black feminism, really my mom. Growing up, my mom would always share different Black authors, different Black American feminist theories, and make comments to me even as a child. And so I feel that I'm really heavily focused in the art arena because most of my family are artists. Even my dad, he was a drummer. So he's a musician, which is an artist. My mom was a historian, storyteller, and focused on art. And so, well, maybe I should give more context about myself. I became deaf at 6. And I knew I was Black, but I didn't identify as deaf until later in life, maybe when I was in the 5th grade, we could say. And so the things that my mom exposed me to were already ingrained in me. And so when I went into the school for the deaf, it was like, okay, their upbringing is different than mine because they had different backgrounds and histories that they didn't know about. And I couldn't relate to that experience. So throughout my journey and being involved in feminism and being a dancer and an artist and thinking of how to express myself through performance, I related more to activism and the struggles from history from that perspective. And I really see it more in a visual light. And so I think it gave me a deeper understanding to apply to my movement, to my dance movement, and having purpose and intention that related to the past and that I can now embody. And so then I try to envision how I can relate to that in present day and how I can express that for others to relate to, because sometimes people are so involved in activism and fighting, but they don't really feel that's other people might not feel that's their place. And so I try to give them a space through dance and through performance. Let's see, did I forget anything? Yes, so my performance and my dance relates to Black feminism, and it helps me to understand it better. And of course, through readings as well.
Thank you so much, Amina. Anyone else want to hop in about what is their route or their journey to Black feminism?
Yeah, Amina, that was a very beautiful story. Thank you. Folks sometimes don't recognize the impact that arts has on culture. And so, yeah, thank you. Um, for me, my feminist practice comes from my grandmother, my mother, my niece. Also, Black trans mass people have also held me accountable to think more intersectionality and more intersectionally and be a little bit more political about my feminist practices. And so Black Trans Fund, joy is all that we do. And when I mentioned earlier about being a Black trans femme and why it's political for me, is that I never want my identity to be erased or looked at as something as like performing womanhood. You know, as a Black trans femme, it allows me to take up space, be free, experience joy, and bring joy to others and inspire more femmes to embrace power. And so my feminist practice actually really shaped how we move as a fund, really understanding that the work that we do is out of love, it's out of liberation, it's out of joy, and always centering that because, you know, we live in a world where joy is not centered. And my life has personally been transformed by the Black trans femmes and trans mass folks who are really sharp about their political analysis about being feminist. Yeah, to transform the world and to look at more joy.
Thank you. All your responses are just, whoo, we about to get into it. Brendan, I didn't forget about you. I did not.
Yes, I wanted to speak, give everyone a chance to speak. But yes, I came to Black feminism out of pain and out of violence. I would say growing up as a young Black girl in South Carolina, a poor Black girl, and not really being surrounded by Black women who understood the importance of loving themselves and claiming their power. And so being a daughter in that situation where, you know, constantly being sacrificed kind of to predators and to violence through different ways in the church, outside of the church, like at school. And it wasn't really until I got to college that I began to really open my eyes through the work of Angela Davis, through the work of Bell Hooks, Nikki Giovanni, Maya Angelou, Audre Lorde, that I really got to understand and critique the world around me and to see myself as a feminist, not one that's, what I think makes Black feminism useful and like unusual, right? Is that it's not about feminism as equality, but an allegiance to life, an allegiance to joy, an allegiance to power for all beings, right? Regardless of gender. And also this cultivation of community that is inclusive, right? So that is what radical Black feminism is for me. And I'm excited to talk about what it looks like for everyone. But for me, it's recognizing the truth and the power that of the way that violence and pain has shaped our lives, but not to stay there. And that's like the root of my Black feminist politic. And I would say that I'm just so excited to be on this call with y'all and to talk about this and like really get into that. I'm especially excited to see or to talk about how we incorporate joy in the midst of what we experience.
Listen, this is why this panel is the way it is, child, because we look at because I want to say this before we hop into like the mission of this call is that each of these panelists I've always wanted to work with, and y'all are doing amazing work and bringing so much to this conversation and the different perspectives of how we come into Black feminist thought and behavior. Radical Black feminist thought and behavior is so critical and important. But now we're about to get into the conversation. Obviously, the title of this series is there really a Black feminist movement? And I want to know from y'all, do you think there is a Black feminist movement? Because in my opinion, we do not have a Black feminist movement. I think it's individual organizations and initiatives. Some of them are working in incubators and some are not. But overall, there to me is a disconnect contemporarily in regards to what constitutes Black feminism, how we engage each other as Black feminists, and also what constitutes a movement of Black feminists. And so I want to hear from y'all. That's my opinion. But is there really a Black feminist movement? Why or why not? Who's gonna jump in? Let's go. Let's go.
I'll go. You shook me a little bit with your points there, Jaimee. I'm gonna go with like my initial thought. I think there is. I agree with you that there is. It's not cohesive. We're not doing it as a collective. It is a lot of, some folks are doing stuff in Colombia, some folks are still doing stuff up north, yeah, and it's not necessarily an international movement because Black feminism for me is global. But I do think that right now we're in the planning phase because the thing about movements is there's the quiet before the storm, essentially, where folks need to learn what it is. What is Black feminism? What is Black feminism in the context, or like in your context? Because as we go into this conversation, with Black feminist essentialism, we're not the same. We're not coming from the same places. But I agree with what most folks said, coming from a place of pain and all of the hurdles, all of the grenades that we have to dodge as Black women, just existing, our identities are political, right? So I think we're in the learning phase because you can't jump into movement without learning what the thing is and learning where your values are. And I think that's where, and because Black feminism, as Brendan was saying, is so unusual. It's not mainstream feminism. It's not all these feminisms that from like that have that everybody knows about. This is talking about dismantling systems. Dismantling systems at their intersections, especially. So it requires a lot of thought. We have 500 plus years to go up against if we're thinking historically, right, when these systems were created. So folks need to learn what the thing is before there's an actual movement, and I think that's where we're at. And so I'll say that there is a movement, and folks are just learning about it because it's a lot of materials, a lot of stuff that has gone under the wayside throughout the years. And so now, and we don't want Black feminism to hit the mainstream per se, because what happens with stuff that hits the mainstream, but folks on the back end are learning. And I think that that's what's moving us into that overall international movement.
Listen, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about internationalism. We're going to talk about, I guess, the politics of ADOS and like Black ethnocentrism, a Black American ethnocentrism in our movements. Okay. We're going to go there. Okay. But let me not start. Who's next? Who's next? Thank you, Andrea.
Yeah, that was amazing. I think what came up for me was the reason why I think it's important to identify as a Black femme is that, Black womanhood in this country, actually around the world, is an indoctrination of a white way of being. And so when I talk about the importance of feminism and how it includes trans people and how it includes everyone, right? I think that we do ourselves a disservice and put Black women and femmes in danger by trying to follow these guidelines of what it is to be a feminist. And, I will openly, honestly acknowledge that there is a lot of hurt when you come into spaces and you're talking about your experience as a woman. Everyone's story is different. Very few people have the same experience. But I think for me, one of the things that really comes up for me in a lot of feminist spaces is that there is a lack of holding space for the fact that transphobia does not impact just trans people, and that in the ways in which that women, Black women, Black strong women are masculinized, how womanhood is tied to what's in between your legs and what your body can produce, and doesn't really speak to the full experience. And it leaves out a lot of folks. And so when I talk about Black feminists, I think of a lot of folks who get left out of the spaces. And so like transmasculine folks, of course. And then I also think there is a certain way in which that you have to move in Black feminist spaces in order to be considered a Black feminist. And, and I think it's all rooted in this like performance of, you know, trying to, what's the word? Trying to put our best foot forward and proving to the world that we're women. And I think that doing that on a daily basis and doing that with each other does not allow for us to get free. It actually keeps us trapped in these circles where we're like, okay, yeah, I hear you over there, but let me tell you why you're not a woman, right? And so when I say, yes, there is a Black feminist movement, I do also name that I don't think that we have built the right relationships with each other to actually come together and really talk it out. Because yes, some of it is how trans women show up in space. Some of it is how masculine folks show up in feminist space, but it's also how other Black feminists are showing up in the space as well. And I think if we can come to the table and understand that we are all femmes and we are trying to get free, I think the Black feminist movement will actually transform and take over the world.
Mic drop. Listen. And there's so much to unpack there. And thank you so much, Bree. And we can see in the comments, people have a lot to agree with as well. Yes, I feel like hopping off to another question, but I'm not, because I want to hear from everyone else.
And this is Amina.
Yes, Amina.
Okay, so I'm gonna be honest. Feminism is too broad for me. And I feel like it makes us stuck. So for me, thinking about how you become a feminist, people say you have to be a woman who's experienced oppression, but then they exclude Black women from feminism. And they exclude disabled people and LGBTQIA people, and they focus on this one narrow group. And so if people ask me, are you a feminist? I feel like, how do I respond to that? And I kind of want to stay on the sidelines and not identify myself. Yes, I believe in feminism, but now when we think about Black feminism, are we a movement? I don't know, because we are siloed in so many different groups and none of us are really coming together collectively. So I think it's interesting how these groups are all divided in that way. And we haven't yet acknowledged the understanding of disability and inclusion and everything that you all just stated too. All of these other folks who are excluded, we're all Black. We're all experiencing the same pain. So that's where I struggle with the concept, but I do believe we are a movement, just that we're not my vision or the vision of what the movement should be, where we can recognize these different experiences. And you would never even have to ask us, you would just know we are the Black feminist movement.
Thank you, Amina. You don't even have to ask, are we a Black feminist movement? And this is the provocation, right? Because if we're asking the question now, that means that there's some ruptures there. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Who's next? Who wants to share? Is there really a Black
I just wanted to add as well, when thinking of the question, is there really a Black feminist movement? I found myself going, I'm not sure. I don't know. Like, you don't want to say no because you don't want to discredit the movement and the work that is being done. But also, similar to what Amina is saying, like, I find that with Black feminist organizing, like, I live in London, I live in the UK. Sometimes it feels like like you can only be a Black feminist if you're an intellectual, if you're an academic, if you're inside the academic institution, Like, I find myself, no tea, no shade to anyone, just like, I'm not an intellectual, I'm not an academic. And so sometimes I think, where is the space for me to engage? Like, I'm constantly thinking of, if Black feminism is meant to be in pursuit of our collective liberation, you know, if Black feminism is meant to be intersectional, like it's meant to deal with all the oppressions that all people, like all Black feminists, all Black non-men are facing, where is the space where we can all come together? I don't know what that space looks like, you know? Is it lots of small local grassroots organizations? Where are the study groups outside of institutions of higher academia? You know, where are the community spaces that are centered on mutual care, childcare, health advocacy, social theory, queer feminist praxis? I don't know where I can go to learn those things. That is my honest to God truth. I don't know. Like when I try and like I said, I do a lot of reading, so it's me being a hypocrite because I think it can't just happen in theory. It can't just happen by reading. It needs to happen in community. You've got to go out there and actually engage with people and movement build. But then I think back to like the Combahee River Collective's statement and what they said they were doing, were actively committed to struggling racial, sexual, heterosexual, and class oppression. And I feel like not all Black feminists have the same goals. You know, some Black feminists say, but this only is, you know, Black feminists who believe in the gender binary. How are you for our collective liberation? How are you for our collective freedom? So I said I wasn't going to be an op. I said I was going to try and be optimistic. But for me, as someone who like sees myself as a baby Black queer feminist, and I want to get more involved, especially in like the London space. I would love Londoners in the chat to correct me if I'm wrong, but where are the places that we can go? And then on top of that, I am British Ghanaian. What do I know about Ghanaian Black feminist struggles? Very little. What connections are there internationally? Very little. Like, I wasn't going to talk about America centering itself because I'm not going to do that. But in terms of like, I think the reason why a lot of us tend to end up learning about American Black feminists is because we don't have that education here in the UK. Like a lot of us don't. There are places in Brixton, like the Caribou Centre, that does, you know, it does educate people. But in terms of what kind of movement building is here, I don't think we have much. I think we have a lot of organizations that are committed to creating spaces for communities to come together, for people to connect. But I don't think that is a Black feminist movement. I think that's a space for respite. And whilst I very much so believe in centering joy, we can't be at the club 4 times a week. We can, but we can't do it on it. We can't do it on its own. You know, where are we actually engaging? Where are we creating these spaces? I don't like to think that things don't exist. I like to tell myself I don't know of them. But yeah, where is the mutual childcare? Where is all of the things that actually make Black feminist praxis work, make these movements, you know, how do we love ourselves and love each other? How do we see a way for us to get free? I don't know if that exists. I don't know. I want it to. I really want it to, but I don't know.
Listen, the intellectual part, Brendan, we about to rock into it because when that mic drop right there by Audre, let's go, Brendan, let's go.
You know, even though I have a PhD, I have all the bones to pick with the academy, particularly as my experience as a, you know, darker skinned Black woman. And when I got locks, things shifted too. So that's a separate conversation. But you all have said things, I'm literally looking at my notes and I'm like, okay, that's covered, that's covered, that's covered. And really, for me, right, I don't think that there is a movement because we have to, as others have mentioned, right, what are we moving to? And I look at what's happening and I'm like, okay, where is the motion? What are we looking for? What is the North Star or the goal of the different groups that are out there that are doing the work? Like, honestly, what the fuck is the work? Like, what are y'all doing? And I think at the core of it all, we really have to ask ourselves, like, are we trying to be white or are we trying to be free? Are we trying to be human or are we trying to be free, right? Are we trying to be saved or are we trying to be free? Are we trying to be woman or are we trying to be free? And as an abolitionist, right, I think that a lot of the movements, right, or what we're moving towards is kind of, I don't know, it feels kind of like we're static, right? It's like we keep doing the same thing, saying the same things, talking to the same people, having the same conversations, because we all aren't ready to admit to ourselves that we're not ready to be free. We're ready to be white, right? We want to be white. We want to be human. We want to be saved. We want to be rich. We want to be this, but we're not necessarily ready to be free. And freedom takes sacrifice, right? Freedom takes the willingness to say, I will lay down the aspirations for XYZ, right? In order to uplift my sister or my brother, or my sibling, right? And I think that a lot of Black feminist movement is spinning its wheels, because it's that nonprofit industrial complex, it's that philanthropy complex, right, that we get ourselves in, where freedom is actually the antithesis of keeping our own names and our own movements alive, right? Are Black feminist organizations working towards their end, or are they just working to make sure their bills are paid? Are Black feminist organizations working towards creating these communities and places for children, for trans people, for queer people to be free? Or are we all just making sure that our papers get published? Are we making sure that we have a mic to speak to? And I think that for me is where I stand. I don't see a movement. I see folks spinning wheels. I see different groups spinning wheels. But there's no cohesive, and we're not building power in ways that actually allow for us to be liberated. So I think that there's a time and a place for optimism, but optimism requires delusion. And in order for us to really have a conversation, we have to move from a place of truth where we really are. And yeah, that's what.
Ooh-wee. Listen, and we have to move from a space of truth. And the truth is, to your point, Brendan, we've been lying really about what is happening in our movements. Someone said what I was doing was very controversial, and why should we not be controversial? We are talking about our lives here. And so it's just mic drop, right? Do we want to be white? How many followers do we want? How much neoliberalism in our politics do we accept? Who gets to be a celebrity in our movements? We who gets the book deals, the brand deals? I mean, these are all honest conversations. To Audre's point, the intellectual part, are Black women academics the owners of Black feminism? Who gets to be seen as an academic in this regard? So even Amina, right? The siloing of Black deaf women in the movement. Bree, Black trans femmes and Black mask folks. How do we incorporate or make sure, right, there's no gender binaryism in our movement? Andrea, to your point, listen about internationalism, right? And the centering global North-based English speaking Black feminisms, right? Y'all hit on so many different points, right? Listen, we about to go there even more. So my next question, y'all talked about this Black feminist essentialism, right? That has plagued our movements. I'm also curious, right? What are some anger? So in Audre Lorde's Eye to Eye, Black Women, Hatred and Anger, she discusses some angers among and between Black feminists that have and continue to plague our radical Black organizing. So I'm curious to know what to you are some angers and ruptures, barriers and silences and harms that continue to plague our organizing, and how do we address and even abolish these ruptures, silences, and harms in our movement?
I'm happy to go first with this one with my opinions. I was thinking a lot about the sameness, like the idea of Black women all being the same. We're all kin. We all have a collective struggle. Because like I said, I think we have a collective goal and our struggles look different. Our contexts are different. But then the other thing I was thinking about too is that idea of Black sameness is the very thing we're trying to liberate ourselves from. It's this idea of Black people being a monolith, which we're saying, no, we're not. We are all very different, varied people from varied contexts, varied backgrounds, varied lifestyles. But then when I thought about Bell Hooks's critique of Eye to Eye again, I thought it through. And the first time I read Eye to Eye, it didn't occur to me to critique the collective we at all. I just said, oh, this is something that I can relate to. So I just took that we for what it was. And it took reading Bell Hooks saying, But what about the Black feminists that don't have that experience? Why are you putting this on us? And it got me thinking a lot about, I feel like how quote unquote identity politics has been misappropriated now from what it originally was meant to mean. Is that people are taking on a struggle that they don't actually have. You know, people are saying I've experienced XYZ as a B, but like, you didn't live like that. You did not have that life. And there are times that I have to check myself and say, these are my identity markers, but my identity markers don't mean what you think they mean. Because also, where has that definition come from? Like, I understand that we've all come to Black feminist thought because of pain, because of a desire, a yearning for liberation, but also the thing that connects us is not just our pain, it's not just our struggle. Like, being Black feminist is not synonymous with struggle, which takes us back to what Bree was saying about focusing on and centering joy. And then I just wanted to give like examples of like historic Black feminist groups in London. I feel like they don't get their platform, but also to kind of highlight their conflict. So there was a national Black organization called OWAD, the Organization of Women of African and Asian Descent. And I mentioned that because also in the UK, being politically Black was a legitimate identity. I'm not saying that I'm comfortable with that. I'm saying it was a legitimate identity because it was defined as all people who have been colonized. And so in Black feminist movements at a point in the UK, there may have been Asian people in there. There may have been Cypriots. It is confusing. It creates its own conversation itself. But one of the conflicts with OWAD was they didn't want to prioritize like queer struggles. You know, there was this fear of, oh, it's not as important as everything else. Let's focus on the quote unquote important things. We don't want the men to say that our Black feminist organizing is silly because we're all lesbians. But as a Black queer feminist, your refusal to see me as I see myself means that you're not for our collective freedom. Your insistence on saying that we're all the same whilst ignoring the identity that I am telling you is a very, very important part of my life does not mean that we're for the same struggle. And I think I'll speak just a little bit about the Black feminist essentialism too. I feel like the way that it plagues our strategies for liberation is like, how can you try and ideate a world where we're all free if you refuse to see me? What does that look like? If you believe in a gender binary, what do you think that means about like, what is my purpose meant to be as someone that you perceive as being female and so has to do X, Y, and Z? And on top of that too, I think it's also if you assume then that women are inherently nurturing, what does that mean for people who the first place they experience hatred was from their mothers? What does that mean for people who have been abused by women in their lives? What does that mean when you're trying to deal with conflict in your own Black feminist organizing space? Because you've told us that we have to believe that all Black feminists are nurturing, compassionate, caring, but we can't, like, in believing in our ability to be unique and to be complex, nuanced, multifaceted individuals, you also have to believe in our ability to do harm. Because if you refuse to acknowledge that, how do you solve it? How do you look at that? So like, I think the sameness is just really problematic. I think it creates the same problems that it claims to want to solve. And I don't think that's how we get free. I think Black feminist essentialism, I struggle to see it as being rooted in a genuine Black feminist praxis personally, because it ostracizes, it leaves people out, and that's not the kind of Black feminist praxis I want to be involved in. And I will leave it there.
Y'all going in. Y'all going in?
I mean, actually, who needs to go after that for real?
Bree, you got to go after this.
You know, Audre, I just want to say one thing. You said Center in America, and I was like, you know, fuck this place over here. Also, I do think you brought up a lot of good points, and you know, it reminded me of when I first transitioned and the conversation that I had with some of the people who were closest to me, who either named that they knew they could see it or they felt it. My grandmother came up to me and told me this beautiful story of a Black trans woman that used to do her and her mom's hair, and how this person was like free and like walked around, nobody disrespected them. And I think that one of the things that infuriates me about Black people is that, you know, queer, trans, Black people actually move and shake some shit. And I am sitting back always at this critique of watching how our arts and our culture is being co-opted by everyone. Everyone on the Housewives is saying, hey girl, and flipping their wrists like this. The people getting bodies like the femme queens. Like there's all these things that Black, trans, queer folks have like given to society. Men wearing nail polish and dresses, like, right? But the same people who that's their identity and it's outside of the clothes, it's outside of the breast implants, it's outside of the makeup. And it's like, we don't want that. We want all the things that you have on you. Kind of like, you know, that scene in Cinderella when she got all dressed up for the ball and the bitches saw her and was like, where you think you going? That's my stash. That's my, yeah. And so it's like, I feel like we always, as a Black trans femme, I get annoyed because I love Black women. I love Black femmes because at the end of the day, I would not be able to be here and exist if it was not for Black trans, Black femmes. Actually, sis, let's be clear. The Black trans people brought me into community and they helped me. But it was actually the Black cis women in my life that kept me from a lot of things. And that showed me that I could have on a dress and heels, but I could rock with the boys on the corner. My mom fought her entire life. And I saw that in real time. And what I saw was my mom being the woman that was like, you know what, you're just not going to tell me anything and you're not going to treat me any type of way. And that's how I operate in the world. And so when Black women come to me and they're telling me things, when Black women actually do things that are harmful to me, and I get my feelings, my first thought is, but you love Black women. And so I give Black women, femmes, all the space to do the things that we need to do together. And I don't feel like as someone who has been dedicated to that, not only in how I move around this world, but in my work, that yeah, you always have to come to the table with proof as to why you're committed to doing this stuff. And it's like, actually, I'm doing this better than you. And you're the leader. And so, you know, that struggle is real. And I think, Audre, you reminded me that it's rough out here for Black people everywhere. And I just thought America was ghetto, but clearly everywhere else is. Check.
I think for me, when I think about and anger like sits at some of the center of what I study and with Black women, and Black non-binary people in Baltimore. A lot of the anger that I've experienced working with Black feminists, pretty prominent ones as well, has been around protection. This idea that because, you know, I have these things, these degrees, this money, this access to spaces, that this too moves me away from what it means to be Black, which is to be utterly unprotected. Right. So to live life in a Black femme body, right, is to experience a kind of utter unprotection. And so that anger that I see that kind of reverberates through our movements is around that. This idea that, okay, I have these things. Why aren't you, I don't know, I hate to say it, but like a lot of the prominent Black feminists that I've worked with, right, move through space like white women. They move through space in a way that's like, you know, because I have pain and hurt and these tears, you should be lining up to take care of this for me, right? Because I have this thing going on, you should be putting your life on the line for me. You should be doing all of these things for me. So I think there's this core anger around protection. And I saw that in Audre Lorde's piece where she talks about her first abuser being her mother, right? I didn't speak for myself, right? My first abuser was my mother, right? A dark-skinned Black woman with coarse hair. And to think around like her anger was at the core of like why she moves through the world in the way that she does is because she was utterly unprotected as a girl. And so when we think about what that means for our radical organizing spaces that are organized, as Bree and Audre are saying, around this gender essentialism, is we have, and what I've witnessed when I lived in New York in that organizing scene, right, is we have cis queer Black women who say, oh no, we are the most unprotected, we are the most harmed people in space, right, that completely marginalizes Black trans people in their experiences. And the protections that they need to be afforded in our space because they are the ones who are at the forefront. Like Black, queer, and trans people are the ones who are literally doing the fighting, right? Everywhere they go. And their identities allow for that to happen. And also something that you all mentioned about identity, like yes, I identify as Black, but that's because Blackness is imposed on me. I can't necessarily escape from it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that, as you all have said, that we have the same experiences. And so I like to think about identity as this kind of shortcut for people to understand how to oppress each other. And so like that's how I think about identity, and that's how I use it in my own work, right? Like feeling like this idea of feeling Black, Brie, as you said, right? Or feeling woman or feeling whatever. It's like identity is useful for understanding power. It's useful for understanding oppression, but we have to be building a world and building movements where we're moving outside of what people look like in this European understanding of how to move through the world, right? Which is based on our vision and perceptions of each other.
Yes, I think.
Yes, and this is Amina. Wow. I'm just watching and listening to all of this. And just my mind is blown in this space because every day we think about things as we move on with the tunnel vision. And we think about the different perspectives. And this is just a lot, just kind of pulling ourselves out of the different perspectives. And for me, let me back up just a little bit, just and get clear on the question. I agree that everybody does not have the same experience, but each one of us in our stories, there is something in that. Now, my first thought was you're looking out in the world and you see a Black woman and you think of it as being Black women for Black women. And do you find yourselves in them? Do you see them in the disabled women? Do you see them in trans women? And so just in terms of people not looking at that type of thing. And in that space and that experience that I encounter repeatedly, the question of that, so opening up and then thinking about Black people accepting all Black women, and then the different individual groups and disentangling that is so complex. And so let me, so talking about the first pain being a mom, of being from the mother, that is an experience that I share as well. And hearing other people talk about, I feel like that I can relate to that experience. However, it's strange because the experience, let me try to get a grasp on this. The experience with my mother, we had a loving relationship, but at the same time, I'm trying to figure out how to explain this, going through not knowing with my siblings, I had 6 siblings. And so just seeing the different relationships that they had with that number of siblings, that means that their experience are very different, especially coming down the family line from the oldest to the youngest, you know, and I'm in the middle. And so that perspective where I was, my relationship to my mom growing up, it was not really, I was not really identified as a deaf person and not really recognized as a deaf person. And there was a little bit of sign in my family, but not full communication. But I feel like I'm blessed because I have a deaf sister as well that's 1 year apart from me. And I can't imagine what it would be like without them because then I would be just alone without that opportunity to communicate with someone. So when I went into the school for the deaf, that actually, well, not forced, that influenced me in terms of finding my own identity, finding my own power. That's something I didn't have before. And just feeling like I was experiencing that as a deaf person, and sometimes adversarial experiences I struggled with, and then repeatedly experiencing them. And not in that small group with my family unit, experiencing that and then experiencing these same kind of oppressions in the wide world. I feel like that I never wanted to have to feel that way. But it's interesting because from a deaf person who experienced different experiences from other siblings, I grew up in North Carolina, so you know that I was in a primarily Black school, and then moved to Rochester, New York, where it was primarily white. And so that transition in that community was quite a challenge as well. So I was just trying to figure out how I find my place going from there. And I feel like that I didn't understand that transition that I have to make, going from place to place, and where do I fit? And did I have to make a choice? There were one or two Black people in Rochester that I knew. And so the thought being taught to me that I would bring to Rochester with me, I had a lot of struggles with that and finding myself and finding who I was, even at a school for the deaf. And then finding that Black deaf community there and interacting with them, that made me dig into myself and who I was and pull out some things to find out the different roles that I had to play. And then I had to work with different exposure that I had. And it was just, there's so much. I felt like in so many ways there was too much. So many things happened and so many experiences and different perspectives. And that just blew my mind. But I just want to thank you for sharing, and I want to thank you for giving the opportunity to share, because that brought up a whole lot with me about my family and about my education as well.
Thank you, Amina. Andrea, I want to hear from you as well. Thank you.
Ooh, I mean, echoing everything that has been said in spades. Some of the conversation brought up this term that there's a book actually called Identity Capitalists, which is like, y'all were giving me that energy where it's like, oh, so I'm gonna pluck every oppressed identity that I have and I'm gonna bank on it, which is like not rooted in Black feminism. But hey, you got to to what Brendan was saying, you got to make a bag, right? Because we're all complicit. So how do you, if you're not stepping into Black feminist spaces, like a barrier, if you don't know how you show up, what your positionality is, being reflexive in what Audre said, Black feminism is not synonymous with struggle. Like if you got your degrees, if you grew up in upper middle class, there are these different hierarchies, right? That everybody has privilege. If you know where your privilege is and you show up in Black feminist spaces, because that's the one critique that I have against Bell Hooks when she stepped into the space. Two things. We can't be afraid of anger. The black angry woman trope. Let me be angry. Let me be angry. Please and thanks. I am going to be angry because that's what my soul needs right now. If it's something that needs to be mediated, sure, fine. I'm not trying to insult anybody, but I need to be angry. And that piece of you need to know how you show up in spaces. Because you can talk the talk, but the thing is always, folks, what is the capacity that people have to take all of this in? All right. So as Amina was saying, it's a lot. When you pull in all your identities, especially, it's a lot of information to consume. People got to work. People got kids to feed. People got to survive out into the world. What capacity do you have to absorb all of this information? It's a lot. And dissecting it. Who has the time? Who has the energy? Who has the language for it? So there were a lot of things that those couple of things, and then how are you complicit? Because we're all involved in this patriarchy, right? I got the mother wounds as well. I was raised by a light-skinned Dominican woman. That's a whole loaded thing. I'm gonna let y'all interpret that. But how are we complicit in patriarchy? Because we all are. We have to dismantle that as well internally.
Listen, I just want to thank, first and foremost, each and every one of you, each of our panelists, even folks in the chat, for your vulnerability. Because these conversations, although people wanted to, in many cases, sensationalize it as like, oh, this is going to be some shade and tea. This is about our lives. This is about our pain and our trauma and hurt that we also experience from our family structure in society and with each other. So I want to just emphasize to take seriously that it's hard to come in vulnerable. It's hard to come in and express certain things that we may have never shared before. But I want to thank and acknowledge each and every one of you, because this is also bring to the fore things in my life as well that I have not always spoken about. So thank you it's a healing space. So thank you all so, so much. Andrea, you talked about patriarchy in our movements. And so the next question I want to ask is, in your opinion, how has neoliberalism, patriarchy, competition, and symbolic leadership and gestures impacted our movement? Because, and I meant to put jealousy as well. How do these things impact our movements? How does plagiarism and lack of political citation impact our movements, right? So I'm going to put this in the group chat so we can have the question in there, but I want everyone to hop in. In your opinion, how has neoliberalism, patriarchy, competition, jealousy, plagiarism, and symbolic leadership and gestures impacted our movements?
Yeah. So yeah, how do you even answer that question? How it's a plague. It really is a plague. It consumes the movement from the inside. You have folks that haven't done the work on themselves, right? Because you can't come into you can come into this movement with carrying a lot, but you can't move forward carrying a lot. All right, so it's a plague. That's for me. That's the easiest way to say it. And the neoliberalism, people don't talk about neoliberalism a lot. I say that I'm in part. I am very much complicit in the system. I work for the nonprofit industrial complex. We are not a nonprofit is not going to save us. The nonprofit industrial complex is not going to save us. That work that's being done in the community. No 501c3, no 501c4 is going to save us. So it really is eating us from the inside. The jealousy, like if you ain't doing the work on yourself internally, you're not going to move forward, and it's going to be detrimental to the movement.
And just to slide on in there, just to add my 3 cents to this. Yeah, what I find to be the most puzzling thing, but it actually makes the most sense if to contradict myself, is that we have movements that profess to be Black queer feminists, where Black queer and trans people are not safe. We have movements where what it means to be Black queer feminists means that Black cishet men are allowed to still kill, rape, and destroy without punity, because they are men who are learning, and they are men who can become better, or they are men that people are attracted to, men that people see because they are attracted to, that they think are redeemable, in that sense. So they continue to steal, kill, rape, and destroy because they are quote unquote redeemable, right? And so I think that's one way that I've seen patriarchy come into space. And I think also around gender as well. So referencing a comment that I made before, like when I was attempting to do work with a particular organization in New York, and I attended an orientation, and the orientation, we had this activity where we would like agree or disagree. And there was a Black cis gay person, a gay man, let me say this, who was there. And the topic was Black men are the white people of Black people. And everyone moved to the agree side, but this one Black cis gay man. And they allowed this Black cis gay man to yell at us, to berate us for an extended period of time. And that is when I knew, oh, baby, this is not a Black queer feminist space. If this is what Black queer feminism is, that's not for me. If I want a man to yell at me, I could just go home, you know? And that's where I was at the time of my life. You know, if I want a man to yell at me, I could just go home. So it was the ways in which patriarchy and feminism get twisted so that we kind of do the same kind of coddling of cis men in spaces that they experience in the world outside of the space that's supposed to be safe for us. And for me, it pushed me to the point where I said, what is the point of even identifying as a Black feminist and being in these spaces if I'm going to experience the same kind of harm that I experience being out in the world? Like, what is the point? So I think that in conjunction with again, Black cis women, whether they be queer or not, centering themselves as the ones who need to be the most protected in these spaces at the expense of Black trans mass people, at the expense of Black trans women, is the way that competition, jealousy, and all of these things kind of fold into that. And I will say and as a call to also our elders as well, who might be used to performing in these spaces according to the logics of old, these logics of like, I got to be a celebrity, I got to have a name, etc. Where that plagiarism that you talked about, Jaimee, comes in. Having worked on several projects with prominent Black feminists, and we get to the end and my name is not on nothing. My name is not on nothing. Or, a prominent Black feminist who has an entire organization that's built around keeping her relevant in this day and time. Instead of thinking about real tenets of Black feminism that actually allow for us to build community, to honor our differences, to allow folks to grow, to keep things moving forward, folks would rather stay in this kind of static place to amass like power. And that angers me a lot.
I'm sorry, I'm like speechless. It's all the feels. Amina, thank you so much, Brendan. Thank you so much. Amina, yes.
This is Amina. And I'm just thinking about this concept of anger and the struggle. And those of you who are working on your healing, quote unquote, healing, and just how to continue. You're working on yourself. You're working on how to address these issues. You're looking for support spaces. And how do we find time to focus on healing? So, for example, thinking back on my mom, whatever her pains were, those were passed down to me because she didn't get to focus on her healing. We didn't have these open dialogues to talk about those issues. Who am I as a woman? Who am I as a deaf person, as a disabled person? And whatever those dialogues should have been, right? We didn't have that. And so it was a closed gateway in regards to moving towards healing. So now I can look at my mom and the things that I didn't like that are now incorporated into my experience that I'm trying to avoid to pass on to my two daughters. And so thinking about, what do I do with this? What do I do about that? And what I'm trying to give to my daughters, a safe space, a healing space where they can heal, where I can heal from the things that were passed down to me and the struggles that I'm trying to work through. And so I've been trying to focus on my own work and making sure that I don't pass that down to this next generation and trying to teach them and creating spaces where we can have these dialogues and discussions. And that's not automatic, right? Because doors are not automatically open to those conversations. So we have to open those spaces. And then we can start the dialogues and start the collaboration with one another. It's not this concept of, nope, I'm in this silo and you can't participate here, or I can't have this conversation with you, or that discussion can't happen with you. We're all here in this space right now, and we all have diverse and very distinct perspectives, and we're having that open dialogue. And this is exactly what we need. This is a perfect example. And so it just brought to mind the concept of healing and just wanting to move forward with healing. And thank you for this space to do that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And it reminded me that on my own personal healing journey, I was really dedicated to making sure that this time that I got it right. and watching how the people around me have responded, and it has not been positive. You've changed. I don't like the way that you're talking to people. I don't like the way that you're moving. And, in some self-evaluation, I was just like, here I am, feeling good about the decisions that I'm making, doing things that I want to do, centering myself. And now everyone feels abandoned and everyone feels lost. And so I think as Black femmes, I think we need to be a little bit more open and honest about that. And it just kind of reminded me that, society has not always cared for femmes that have given so much to the world. And I think one of the things that irks me about this movement in general is that we have allowed for this white way of being to be the marker. And anyone who is not a part of that is automatically like ostracized, ogled. And, I think one of the things that annoys me about celebrity is that, I've been watching and just being very aware that there have been some of the greatest Black entertainers, public figures, and the ways in which that Black men, Black women, other communities have questioned their gender. And we allow it to happen and we don't say anything. And, I'm also a firm believer that, as a person who I've known personally, cis women who have been called trans and heard how that has impacted them, and also recognize that they have never had the space to be able to share that with someone that actually listens to that and takes it seriously and understands that regardless to your assumptions about people and when you say things and when you put things out in the universe, the impact that it has, regardless to how you identify, how you were born, what you know to be true. And, Chris Rock got slapped. He should have. And the response to that was like, he should have held his cool while a man was sitting there talking about this femme that he's in love with is a backwards conversation. And, I feel like one of the things that annoys me the most is that sometimes when I'm watching this happen, experience it with people that I don't know, I automatically want to come to them, give them a hug, let them know that they're loved, let them know that that's not okay. But I think in society, we have gotten really comfortable with taking all of the best attributes of femmes and throwing it back in our face and telling us that we are not femme or women enough. And I think that, there have been very few cis men in my life that have actually been good to me. And they all understand this to be true, that if they're in a space and a place and someone is saying horrible things about me as a person, they know that they're going to do it to other Black women. And so, I think that to me is a real sign and a testament that, some of the things that we are doing in community is actually working. I think that I think it's this reclamation of the leaders aren't in the schools, aren't on TV. It's actually the people in the hood. And, I think one of the things that annoys me about feminism, it does not allow space for the hoes, for the hood rats, when in all actuality, they are the ones that are most clear and the ones that are leading the way. And I don't think we don't give the community that we say that we love and that we serve the actual flowers that they deserve. Because if it wasn't for Black trans people believing in joy liberation, I wouldn't be here. If it wasn't for Black femmes who actually understood that feminism is expansive and includes a lot of people, I would not be here. And so I think this shift of Okay, girl, you got the award. Okay, girl, you wrote the book. Okay, you got the TV gig. Like, congratulations. But that's not the measure. And actually, the measure is, can those same people go into these communities that they say that they come from and that they love and they serve and be actually and actually be able to be present? And I don't think that that's true.
Ooh, y'all. Listen, thank you so much. I'm actually left speechless because this is everything, many of the things I've been feeling, many of the things I don't have language for, many of the things that has experienced, similar experiences that have almost made me recant my positionality as a Black feminist. And I say that honestly and truly, right? And so thank y'all so much. Ajua, thank you, Bree, so much. Would you like to offer any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say I'm so grateful for everything you've all said. I've been sat here nodding my head so viciously that I'm gonna have neck pain tomorrow. I want to talk a bit about healing first, and then I'm gonna get very petty because sometimes we need to. Um, like I think sometimes we underestimate that like healing work is doing the work. Like growing pains is being in pain. Like as someone who has tried so hard to be committed to healing, I don't think we give ourselves credit for just how exhausting, just how tiring it is. And when you're trying to survive life in Babylon under capitalism as well, no wonder why we're constantly burning out. No wonder why we constantly get so close to saying, do I just give up? Do I just give up? Like it is so difficult. I found that the one time that I was able to really commit to my healing work, life-saving work, and actually recognize the healing work within me was during the pandemic in lockdown, because I wasn't having to go to work. I wasn't the only Black person in white spaces. I was living alone. I had hours and hours to go for runs all the way to where there's nature and back. Like when I know it was a very difficult time for everybody, but what I realized during the periods of lockdown where like I had unlimited time free from capitalism was that, oh, maybe I'm not mentally unwell. Maybe I'm not the problem. It's everything else out there. But then having experienced that and then being told that, oh, we're all, we've learned the lessons, we've seen new ways that the world can be. And I thought, look at what like if there is anything positive I wanted to take from the time, it was the hope that we have recognized different ways of being, and maybe those different ways of being would come into effect. And then it didn't, because capitalism requires you tired, it requires you hungry, it requires you exhausted. But because I'd had a taste of what that healing could be like, it felt worse. It felt more painful. And I think that's one of the things that I really, really struggle with too, because the collective struggle for our freedom and liberation is a struggle, because when you get close, it's not linear. You have to commit, commit, commit. And it is painful. It is tiring to have felt like you're in grasp of that collective freedom that you wanted, and then to go back to things and saying, I know this isn't for me. I know I can't take this anymore. So yeah, I just say that to say like, respect all of you on your healing journeys. I respect all of us on our healing journeys. And then to link that with neoliberalism as well. One of the things I've become increasingly concerned about is a lot of us are learning about different healing modalities in books because we can't afford to go to the practitioners. And we're now in a phase where, like back in the day, I mean, I live in pounds, but you could maybe spend $7-8 on a book. It might now cost you $30. Your rent's going up, your taxes going up, your grocery bills are going up, your childcare's going up. Where can we find the resources to actually commit to the healing when it now feels like it's all behind a paywall? What does that look like for us? And then also on the point of neoliberalism, I'm so sorry to do this to you, but I'm actually not. One of the things I found with Ghana specifically, and like I went back home to Ghana. So I'm like a second generation immigrant. So my dad was born in Ghana. He moved here. My mum lived in London and then moved back to Ghana and then came back here. So me and my siblings are the first generation of our family to be born and raised in the UK. But one thing I found in Ghana too is that aspects of the neoliberalism that is happening in Ghana is happening under the guise of Pan-Africanism. It's happening under the guise of quote unquote returning home, right? It's happening, it is the Black diaspora who are also causing the neoliberalism in Ghana, you know, buying all of these houses and these flats so that they can rent them out as Airbnbs and go to Ghana for Dirty December so they can see Black Sheriff for 2 seconds and they can hang out with all the Ghanaian elite in the creative spaces. Yet the average Ghanaian person is priced out of everything in their own land. They're living at home. When it's Dirty December, suddenly a club that was free is 200 cedis. If you're earning an average of 150 cedis a month, how are you meant to get that? And I think the reason why the Black diaspora love going to Ghana so much is because they get to feel what they imagine white supremacists feel. Because in this country, you're no longer the bottom of the pecking order. In this country, your currency has value. People respect you because you're not from the African continent, and you get to go and say that you're just learning about your history. You get to say you're learning about your history, but you're not. You're going to enjoy life. You're not leaving Accra. You're not going to Kumasi. You're not having a look at the place that Yahya Santua was imprisoned. And I think that is it's the neoliberalism, it's the social media, it's the, you know, being perceived as doing the work, receiving the praise, the views, the collaboration, the check, whilst actually not doing anything. Whilst materially not doing anything, and convincing yourself that you're doing something because it makes you feel good. Because you can spend a month on the beach in Ghana with horses and you can eat all the lovely food in the world. You can get your hair done where you know that you're robbing those people. You know that you're robbing those people. Let's be real. Let's be real. But I'm still not done with the pettiness. Oh dear. The social media stuff as well. For me, it's like, we all so many people have to dilute themselves to fit the algorithm, but also who does the algorithm have in mind? White people. So where you have Brendan, you were talking about, you know, radical Black feminist praxis. I often find that what, for want of a better phrase, I'm going to call them sellouts, what sellout quote unquote Black feminists do is they dilute their message down, because Black people only make up so much of the population. So let's dilute our message down so that white people feel like Black feminism is for them as well. But the subtext of that is, so white people buy our books, so they come to our shows, so we make more money, you know? So we're going to make you believe, yes, you are a Black feminist when you're white. Don't think about your colonial tendencies. Don't think about the racism that's metastasized in your bones. Think about paying me 40 quid to come and see me and to feel good about yourself. Let's think about that. Yeah, it's exhausting. It's really, really, really exhausting. But I really want to stress with the returning home stuff with Ghana. I've had so many conversations with people about that, because when I went back to Ghana to visit my family, one of the things I was so concerned about was, and I'm sorry to do it to you, but a lot of the Black Americans that were in Ghana were disrespectful. Walking around like you own the place, like people should bow down to you because you've got dollars, you're paying in dollars, everyone should listen to you. Oh, but it's my first time here, show me around the motherland. What are you actually doing to support the people in the community? Or are you coming and are you taking? Are you coming and buying land and then setting up businesses so that you can be seen as being, you know, a global Black community? But how many Ghanaian people in Ghana on the land who aren't the children of politicians? Do you know? You know, just because the Ghanaian government said, we're letting everybody come back. You shouldn't listen to everything the Ghanaian government says, because everyone's tapped. Let's be real. Let's be so real. And I think the difficulty is, and I think, Brendan, you touched on this as well, your desire for success under capitalism shouldn't allow you to misappropriate a practice or a praxis that you know you're not following just so you can get what you want. And I think, you know, I was going to talk as well about how a lot of Black feminist organizations are still, you know, centered around patriarchy, but I think I've been petty enough, so I'm gonna leave it there.
You said that, Ashua, and I just wanted to flag too that a lot of US GOP senators are meeting with religious leaders in Africa about their success with religious freedom laws here. So definitely want to speak to that. Like, yeah, they're going back to our home and they plotted against us too.
And I'm happy you said that, because actually just today as well, I found that I found out that Ghana's parliament has now passed a bill so that if you identify as LGBTQ+, or you are an organization supporting or funding LGBTQ+ people, you can get up to 5 years in prison. And a lot of that is to do with like US missionaries and lobbyists in the background as well. And so that's when it comes back to the whole idea of, Andrew, what you were saying about how international is our Black feminist praxis. You want to go to Ghana to go to the beach and rave, but how are you actually supporting Black queer feminists in Ghana who don't have the same level of freedom to openly be who they are? You know, people want to talk about identity politics all the time. There are contexts where identity politics is actually necessary. What are you doing to support them? Or are you just going there to get your 28 inches gold, like goddess locks, to post your pictures on the beach to say, wow, we partied until sunrise? Like, yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that. I'm gonna leave it at that.
I'm just here for the hair.
Oh my goodness. When I tell you all, first of all, Audre, there were several mic drops. There was just several, and it's all true. We are sadly at time, surprisingly enough, and we didn't even get to, because an important part of this is the call to actions. But hopefully maybe this could be a part 1.5 where we come back to talk about the call to actions, because it's not just us talking about these issues, but like, what are we going to do about it? Right? And all of y'all spoke so much about so many different things: healing, right? Centering joy, how we experience violence from our mothers, right? The lack of internationalist praxis, how Black American, US-based, global North-based, English-speaking feminisms have oversaturated our movements, ableism in our movement, the lack of spaces where Black deaf feminists can articulate themselves because of the ableism in our movements. Just everything as well, in terms of who are we returning home to, and is it for our own capitalist ventures and gains? Brendan, you talking about lack of citational praxis in Black feminist movement space. Who gets to be seen as a celebrity or a leader in our movements? We talked about a lot. So sadly, like I said, we are at time, and I want to thank each and every panelist, each and every person who has contributed to this amazing conversation, because you all are breaking barriers so that the next iteration and generation of Black feminists, right, who are questioning like why they don't fit in this space, what are these feelings that I'm feeling, they can come back to what you all said and say like, I'm not alone, right? Or we are not alone in this context. These are the things that we're feeling. I'm not losing myself when I say I want to rescind my Black feminist title, right? Because of the hurt and harm and ruptures that we've experienced. So I want to thank you. I'll probably cry after this later, because this is a conversation I've always wanted to have. And I finally allowed my courage to come forth for this conversation, because it is so needed. And I know y'all will provide the healing and the wonderful perspectives for it. So I want to say thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I want to say thank you to Gloshonda and Kat, our amazing ASL interpreters, for all the work that you do. And I want to thank our audience, who sat here with us and saw our faces as we mics were dropped, shade was, all sorts of things were happening, but it was much needed. Also, this recording or this conversation will be on our YouTube, so please come back to it. And so once again, I just want to let everyone really quickly say any last remarks that they have before we close out, just very quickly. So thank you all so much again.
Thank you for the space. Love Black women radicals. Thank you for the connection to so many diverse voices. It's greatly appreciated. And thank you to everybody who has been rocking through it to 8 o'clock at night. Y'all are appreciated as well.
Yes, I wanted to also say thank you so much, Jaimee, for your labor in putting this together, pulling us all together, and just thank the brilliance and honor the brilliance of all the other panelists. You all I'm so excited to be connected to you, and please believe I will be bothering you. I will be in your inbox about something. But I think, yeah, one of the calls to action that I felt was for us to recognize that healing is often confused with accountability. And until we as Black people decide that we are going to put ourselves first, so we as Black femmes decide that we're going to put ourselves first and heal ourselves, we will never change the world. And so that's where I'm hit. That's where I'm gonna leave it.
Yes, this is Amina. Thank you so much, Jaimee. Thank you for thinking of me. I mean, I think we met a few years ago, 1 or 2 years ago, I can't remember. And the fact that you thought of me, I'm just so honored to be in this space. So thank you so much. And thank you for inclusion as well.
Thank you, Jaimee, for your commitment to Black trans femmes. Yeah, that's the work, and you're doing it. And if other Black femmes could follow in your footsteps, we would have a different world.
I just want to echo what everyone said and say a big, big thank you to Jaimee and to everyone on this panel. You know, Jaimee, when you invited me, I'm sure you could tell I thought, what credentials do I have to come and speak? What right do I have to call myself a Black feminist? And actually, this conversation has been so affirming, and also hearing all of the critiques about the movements too just really like uplifts me and reminds me that, you know, none of us are here in isolation. And regardless of how true the gripes we have with the movement or the lack thereof are, the fact that we share these together, the fact that we're all feeling this way gives me hope that we want to build ourselves into a world where that like our freedom is actually possible. So this has been really, really affirming in so many ways. And I will be an audience member at all the rest of the panels.
Thank you all. My heart is so full. Thank you to each and every one of y'all, to the audience, or Glashonda and Kat. And I hope y'all have a good night and really think about what we've discussed and how we can move our movement forward to the movement that we actually really need and want to see. So thank y'all so much. Have a great night, y'all. Ciao, beijos. Woo! Y'all gonna make me cry.